Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Men in Red 97 podcast. We are joined by a special guest today for a special episode, and that is, of course, Tony Husband. He is an Apple TV commentator based in Nashville and will be doing the Nashville versus Chicago Fire game tomorrow as we're recording this. So, Tony, welcome for the first time to Men in Red 97.
And it's an absolute pleasure, Alex, to be on Men in Red 97 this very first time and looking forward to the game this weekend as well.
Awesome. So, yeah, like I said before we started recording, we're just gonna talk about a couple stuff: Chicago Fire, Nashville SC, MLS, Apple TV. So excited to jump right into this. So, I guess first things first, for our listeners who maybe they've heard your voice, but they don't know a lot about you. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and as well how you ended up in the US here.
Yeah, I'll try and give you the most condensed story because it can be quite a long one if I give you all the details of it. But essentially, I am a Brit living in the US. I came over here in 2020, and at that time, it was actually to lead off Nashville SC's broadcasts in Major League Soccer. Before that, I was a commentator and presenter in the UK. I had about 20 years with the BBC, right from straight out of college. My first job, I was very fortunate, and I worked across sports for the BBC, both through radio into television. I was lucky enough to work on so many great properties from the Premier League, FA Cup, Champions League, Europa League, the Olympics, Wimbledon, the America's Cup sailing. Big set piece events, and things that really gave me a very thorough grounding in both play-by-play broadcasting and indeed television reporting and news and things like that. So a varied background which always had soccer at the core. And when people say, well, how did you kind of leave that and end up coming over to MLS? Well, I've always had a huge passion for American sports. And in fact, actually, it's timely that we're talking with obviously Chicago, because I was in an initial young generation, just as a little kid in the 1980s, when the NFL was first broadcast on British television.
Hmm.
And so among the first kind of real stars of the NFL that were on the TV screens of England were William Refrigerator Perry, Walter Payton, Jim McMahon, Mike Ditka. The list goes on. And that Bears team that crushed the Patriots in Super Bowl 20, I think it was. That was a team that lives long in the memory for anybody who was a young fan of the NFL back at that time. And that kind of really lit the fuse in me of a lifelong interest in American sport. Loved watching American football in particular. Got a little bit into baseball as well. And from that, I actually would later on with the BBC broadcast some NFL coverage and indeed some Major League Baseball as well from time to time, where we would take the American commentary, but we would have studio-based show in London, and I would be one of the hosts of that. So when the opportunity then kind of came over through a chance conversation with someone that there might be some opportunities in the States, I kind of tentatively said, "Oh yeah, that would be great. Let me know." And actually, within a week of having that conversation, somebody had indeed got in touch with me and said, "Would you ever have any interest in coming over to Nashville and actually being our kind of first play-by-play commentary voice?" And one thing led to another. And 5 years on, here we are. Obviously, things have moved on now, and we do it with the MLS Season Pass package on Apple, and thoroughly enjoying a great experience in life.
Yeah, so I'm actually curious a little bit about this because I came over from England to the US when I was 10 years old, so I was a lot younger than you were. But what were your first impressions of MLS when you came over and just kind of getting used to that league? Because I mean, growing up for me, we got like the Beckham game once a week, maybe Thierry Henry. That was like the one game of the week. And I assume when you were younger there wasn't really any MLS. So what was your first impressions when you came over and started getting involved around the league?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'd followed MLS from a distance for some years because it had always been in the back of my mind a thought that perhaps one day there might be an opportunity to go over and get involved in some shape or form. And so, I can remember the league starting off the back of obviously the '94 World Cup, which sadly England were not in, but we were still glued to as kids back in the UK. And then as time went on, yeah, the league started to grow a bit more. I'd say really it started to kind of penetrate UK television in the kind of teens. So after 2010 onwards, I think when teams like Seattle came in with such an impact, Portland later as well, as the fan bases started to grow around the country and the league became a truly kind of national league, the Canadian teams coming on board as well. I think we started to pay more attention to it. And then, Saturday nights in the UK, you would have been working at a game in the afternoon. You come home, and at some point, you might be channel surfing, and there would be an MLS game on from, say, Yankee Stadium or something with New York City FC playing. And so you would start to pay a bit more attention. The coverage was on a bit more. Weekly highlight shows were on a bit more. So you start to get a bit more knowledge of the league. But of course, and you may remember this from your very young days in England, the English soccer scene when you're in England is so all-consuming because you're not just following the 20 teams in the Premier League. People are following 92 teams. You're following the leagues below and even down below those into the non-league. The league structure is so strong, and our culture is so embedded in covering and watching the leagues way below the Premier League that it doesn't leave too much space for following other leagues. But I think MLS is certainly something that came more on the radar as the league expanded in those years, particularly post Beckham, who I guess gave it the Stardust moment in the noughties at least.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for a comparison thing, like I went to a sixth division game once. It was the Vanarama. Well, it would have been the Conference South at that point, and it was
Sixth tier, yeah, South, yeah, National League South,
right.
depending on who the
At the
sponsor
time, it
was at
would
the
have been a
time.
Conference South, I think. I feel like it was crazy because it was like that was a bigger crowd than you get at some like a U.S. second division games, and it's like, there's
Oh
not
yeah,
even room for like Barcelona and Real Madrid even unless it's the Champions League quarterfinals. Like, I feel like it's
yeah,
something that for
absolutely,
Americans it's hard to understand because like
yeah, because
until I came
it's
here, I never
cultural.
would have watched any other European league other than the Champions League.
That's right. And in fact, I would credit my move to America with actually, I spend a lot more time now watching a broader range of soccer from around the world than I probably did in the UK. It is just so all consuming. And you talked about, that was a Conference South game you went to. Yeah, there could have been anything up to 5,000 people at that game. It's real hard football as well. That there is no quarter given. It's a very, very physical end of the spectrum. But again, that's because people will go to watch that if it's their team, and they won't care necessarily that Barcelona, Real Madrid might be on in the Champions League quarterfinal that night. If it's their team, it's their town, it's their identity, they'll still go and watch AFC Sudbury in that Conference South game, or Weymouth, or someone like that. It's that ingrained, it's that cultural. I think the nearest comparison I think I can see with it in this country here is kind of how some people follow their college teams and follow college football, and how embedded in your life your college has been. So years after you've left March Madness, you've got your Duke shirt on, and you might not have been at the college for 30 years, but you go and watch that team. That's your team. That's probably the best comparison.
So I think you've got an interesting perspective being in Nashville since quite literally the first game the team ever played, where you've pretty much seen from, well, in MLS, nothing. I know they had USL before, but from the beginning of MLS to where they are now, you've pretty much seen the whole history of that team. So how have you seen that evolve over these last 6 years?
Yeah, remarkably so. And I think Nashville is just going to go down as one of the great success stories of MLS expansion in recent years. And I think a lot of people would say if you'd said 10 years ago or 12 years ago, let's expand the league into Nashville in Tennessee, I think a few people would have been saying, are you sure? Is that the right move? But I think Atlanta showed what is possible with soccer in the South. Nashville kicked on from that. Charlotte have done so well since they came into the league. And the crowds they get at the Bank of America Stadium, I was there last week, are really strong, even inside a football stadium. Further south, obviously, Orlando, after a stuttering start, but, are a well-backed team with a good fan base and a good stadium. But from Nashville's perspective, came into the league, they had to encounter that COVID year. So it was a really, really tough baptism for them into Major League Soccer. And they were also, of course, the team that came in alongside Miami. And even then, Miami had so much attention on them. So it was always a bit of kind of, well, they're the other team is Nashville that's come into the league. But within the market, they've proved to be a very, very strong player. Season ticket sales have been fantastic at the new stadium. They've built a terrific venue in Geodis Park, and anybody traveling from Chicago to see it this weekend, I'm sure will appreciate what a great soccer venue it is in the country. What a terrific match day atmosphere is generated there as well. So they've got so much right. In many ways, it was a kind of a case of, there's always going to be a moment where there's a bit of a hard fall. If you do so well from the get-go. And then 4 years of playoffs, Leagues Cup was extraordinary. And then finally, it kind of ran out of a bit of steam last year. First managerial change since the franchise has been an MLS team. And now they're in a little bit more of a transitionary phase, but still with so many good things going in their favor.
So first 3 years of Nashville, it was on the local broadcast, so you got to do every game. So the fans there probably got very accustomed to your voice every single week. So what was that like being part, I guess, a small part of that initial identity as the team was creating itself in MLS?
The more I look back on it, actually, the more it kind of warms my heart how special it was. It's not something that's so common in the UK to have. We have voices attached to teams, but they're generally over on local radio, and they work independently of the teams as well. You don't work for the team. But so being a television local broadcaster was a different thing for me. And I probably didn't quite appreciate what a valued and cherished and important, position that you have within the club, within the city, when you're the voice of that team. I knew it was a great gig. It was a great stage to have. I was hugely enthusiastic about helping grow the game of soccer in the area, but just how people receive you, I was quite almost a bit taken aback by just how people, want to talk to you, how well received you are in a city when you move to an area to be that club voice. Very, very special. Look back on it very well. And of course, it gives you, yes, the encyclopedia of Nashville SC, certainly for 3 years, is all up there. It called some quite memorable moments for the team, and including moving over to the new stadium as well. So it was fabulous and different from how it works, obviously, back home.
So then 2023, the big shift comes with Apple TV. I think that was a huge bombshell when that happened for everybody in the league. Big shift in how things worked on a lot of aspects of the broadcast and stuff. So I'm curious, now you're getting different teams. I know you're still doing a lot of Nashville in terms of assignments, but how is that preparation different now where, you have to research two teams every week instead of one?
Yes, well, it's definitely double the work at times. That's for sure. Certainly, I still see a reasonable amount of Nashville. I've done quite a few of their games this season so far at home. But yeah, most weeks actually, it's different teams. For me, it's really just going back to what I knew before, because in the UK, aside from those local radio guys who might be the one club guys who follow the team everywhere, then most people actually that's how it works. You go and do a different game every week. You're given a different assignment. You're doing two different teams every week. So for me, it's like a kind of going back to what I knew. And yeah, it's just going back to being that kind of more straight down the line kind of, if it's world feed or whether it's domestic, a commentator giving the game and giving the game in a completely and wholly neutral fashion, and not really leaning one way or the other in terms of what you've prepped for. So, you'll pull the game right down the line, and the story will be whatever the story of the game is, aside, rather than perhaps if you'd say it was the Nashville broadcast, it would be what the story of the game would be from a Nashville perspective. So, it's like it was for me before, but obviously different to how a lot of people consume their sport here in this country, where it's local broadcasters, really aside from the NFL.
And another thing I'm curious about is because MLS is a unique league in a lot of ways, but one thing is that it has 30 teams, whereas like I feel like a Premier League fan, if you're just tuning in, you're a match going fan, you probably have a pretty good idea about the majority of the 20 teams in the league. Even whether you follow it a lot or a little bit, you have a general idea. But with 30, that's 10 more teams. That's a lot. So has that been a challenge for you when there's so many teams that you can potentially have to cover?
Yeah, I mean, 30 teams. You're right. It's a big league. It's a lot of players to be across. I mean, just this week with the primary transfer window closing this week. The amount of moves we saw and the kind of things I was trying to take either a mental note of or indeed writing it down somewhere. Okay, right, he's gone here, they've gone there. There was a lot going on. And it does require a lot of work and research. I mean, I think people see us, obviously, they see us at the ground on match days and in the stadium, in the booth and doing the game. And people rightly say, and absolutely rightly say, it's a fantastic job. It's a wonderful, privileged position to be in, to be doing something you love and, commentating on sports. But there's a lot of work goes into it as well in the days leading up to it. The preparation is significant, and actually, what they afford you here in the US in terms of the time you're given with both coaches and players before a game means that you're often it's days of preparation and work that lead into ultimately a 90-minute broadcast on a Saturday night usually.
So over the course of the last couple of years, we've spoken to a few of the different broadcasters and stuff. And I know everybody has a different ways to prepare themselves for the game. So can you walk me through what those couple of days leading up to Saturday usually look like for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to be honest with you, I could even probably say, in some ways, your preparation for the following week's game even starts the week before on the Saturday night. Because if I'm in, say, particularly actually, if I'm in somewhere where I'm doing a central time game, so like tomorrow with the Nashville Chicago games, 8:30 Central. So the Eastern time games, the earlier Eastern games will have started. So I'll look. I've got Columbus and Charlotte next weekend, which is a good one up in Columbus. I'll probably take a token look at what the lineups for those two teams are when they come out tomorrow. Even though I'm focused on Nashville and Chicago, which is an 8:30 Eastern game, so your prep never really stops. And to trace it to where it actually starts from, it can go back a long way. But then, actually, as you get into the meat and drink of the week, for me, there's no substitute for just watching games. My primary role as the play-by-play guy is to tell you, is to spot who's on the ball, who's got the ball, what the stories are, what the significance of it is, editorializing the game, all those things. My co-commentator, more often than not, Ross Smith, does a fantastic job at breaking it all down and explaining why this stuff's happening. But for me, the prep really is down to just watching players all the time, watching games, knowing when something happens that is significant because I watched their game 2-3 weeks ago and I saw that happen then. I always remember with Chicago, I was fortunate in a sense, but again, it comes down to prep also to a degree. Chicago's game in Columbus a couple of years back under Frank Klopas, unfortunately, not a great memory for the Fire. Cucho scores 3 goals inside, I think, something like the first 20, 24 minutes of the game. Now, I had been on the mic when Frank Klopas had been in charge of Chicago when Hani Mukhtar had scored 3 goals within the first 16 minutes of the game at Nissan Stadium 2 years before that. And to be able to fall back on that knowledge and say, well, if you're a Chicago fan, you've kind of seen this rodeo before. With a player scoring a hat-trick very early in a game. And in fact, Cucho's was the second fastest hat-trick from kickoff in MLS history at the time, behind only Hani Mukhtar's. Both have been against Chicago, and I'm sorry to say both against poor old Frank Klopas when he's been in charge, because he was in temporary charge on the day in Nashville at the time, and then obviously he was the main manager the second time. So, research comes down to hours of watching game film, if you like. And then a fair bit of time just kind of sitting there and sifting through things, finding things. This weekend, I was really interested to see that Andrew Gutman and Jack Mayer had played together at college at Indiana, where Andrew had been actually college player of the year. Jack Mayer had been on that team with the Hoosiers, and it was his first year. Managed to spend some time talking to Andrew, get a little bit of background about that. So, yeah, it's intensive prep, and it's all hopefully designed to educate and entertain the audience watching the game.
So I guess normally you talk to the head coach, I believe, on the Thursday. I know that's what they usually do in Chicago, at least. I guess what is your scouting report on the Fire this time around as someone who, isn't following that team week in, week out? With Greg Berhalter, there have been a lot of eyes on the team this season, but what has been your perspective from what you've gathered so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a pretty good start. Obviously, the away form has been strong. Whether that's just by circumstance or actually by design. I think we still need to see a few more games to work that out. I like the front three. I think most people probably do and would. But for me, Kuipers, is a player that when he came into the league, I thought, had all the potential to score goals. He's got a wonderful goal scoring record wherever he's played, basically. I mean, he's up to about 80 club goals now in his career. And he's still at a good age as well at 28. Zinkernagel is someone who played in England. You knew a little bit about him in the past. Bamba looks to be exciting as well. So I like the front three. Defensively, they've had to juggle around. There's been some injuries and some problems. Turan is now obviously out for an extended period as well. So you get you bring one back, you lose one, which is difficult. And I think until you can have a settled back line, it's always difficult to achieve that consistency that you want. And MLS, I think, is a very difficult league to achieve consistent results in. It's just such a tough league. It's a grind week in, week out. Midfield is still for me where I'm watching the games I've watched, and I'll be looking forward to seeing the Fire live and in person this weekend. Where I still feel like I don't know quite what the right what the right combination of players is. Is it Kellen Acosta? Is it Mauricio Pineda? Do you play Gutierrez more withdrawn, or are you going to try and push him upfield a little bit more? But then you've got that front three I was talking about. I still feel like I'm looking for the answers there as to how that group comes together best. But ultimately, this is a Fire team that in the years I've been here in this league, it's been, when are they going to turn the corner? When are they going to start to achieve some consistency and repay some of the investment that's come in really as well? I think finally we are on that curve, that turn now. The question is, how quickly the trajectory goes, and can get into the playoffs as the first stage. I'm sure that's something you really want to see later in the year, and wouldn't fancy playing in November in Chicago either. So that's potentially an advantage. Who knows? So I'm promising from what I've seen. I think a few more games will give us a bit more of an idea of where this Fire team is going.
When you look at the game tomorrow, is there any specific area or matchup of the field that you think between Chicago and Nashville is going to be really decisive in this game, or that you're looking out for?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of areas. Kuipers obviously is a strong target man kind of striker, and he's got Zinkernagel and Bamba are kind of either side of him. Nashville are missing Walker Zimmerman at the moment because he's in a concussion protocol from that nasty head injury he had down in Charlotte. So without the presence of Zimmerman there, how strong is that Nashville group going to be coming up against quite dynamic front three that there is, and with the support of Brian Gutierrez, we would assume if he's starting. So that's going to be an interesting battle. And then at the other end of the field, Nashville have proved pretty effective in getting Sam Surridge in the goals. He's got a good record of scoring against Chicago as well the last couple of times. He scored the winner when these teams met at Geodis Park last season. And Hani Mukhtar has got a super record against Chicago with 6 goals over the years. And with an enforced change coming for Greg Berhalter at the back for his team with Turan out, how's his back line going to cope with Nashville at home? I think Nashville are going to be one of the strongest home teams this season. It took a good Cincinnati side, a penalty kick to beat them. They then won late against RSL with a penalty kick of their own. But more often than not, I think Nashville are going to get points at home. So a good test of Chicago, a good road team this season as to what they can achieve at Geodis Park.
Yeah, and I guess the last head-to-head question is not actually on the pitch, but Greg Berhalter's, it's a master versus apprentice type situation. I think it's the first time since he's come back into club football that he's going up against one of his former assistants. I mean, BJ Callahan is really someone who owes his entire coaching career existing at the professional level to Greg Berhalter. So what's been your perspective? I know you've spoken with both of those coaches in the last couple of days, I'm assuming. So what's your perspective on that duel right there on the sideline?
Yeah, do you know what? Well, I'll let you in on something from chatting to both of them. The real duel between these two is on the pickleball court because the families are quite close, and every year they apparently play a bit of a pickleball tournament between them. BJ reckons to be the best pickleball player out of him and Greg. Greg was not quite so sure about that yesterday when we spoke to him. I think he said, yeah, BJ's a good player, but I think he feels he can beat him as well. Both wanted to be clear that it's about the players on the field, but absolutely no doubt, you're spot on there, Alex. BJ Callahan owes Greg Berhalter an awful lot. He took him on as an analyst for the US men's national team, and he saw the potential clearly that BJ Callahan had, advanced him and his career greatly. And he told us, not at all surprised that BJ Callahan now has this opportunity as a first team head coach in Major League Soccer. It's a great subplot to the game. They both know each other inside out. I think they both feel one of them might have a surprise up their sleeve in something tactically. Maybe there's a nuance they're going to do, because ultimately they know how each approaches the game, what their philosophy is, and how they want the game played. So I'm going to be very interested to see if we can spot what that surprise might be. But it's a really good subplot into the game, and we'll certainly get into it during the game. I hope the game is so good we don't have a lot of time to get into it, but it's certainly something we'll be touching on in our broadcast on Apple TV.
Certainly. So the last thing, just before we wrap up, I just want to ask kind of a general question. Is there anything about this experience you've had with MLS, with Season Pass, MLS as an experience as a whole, that, it's maybe a bit unique and people wouldn't think about, but that's something you've been really, really enjoyed and appreciated during your time here in this league?
Well, I think the thing I've appreciated is just how incredibly large the continent it is that we're effectively playing on, and the fact that we're playing with three teams in Canada as well. This is a vast country. It's difficult sometimes when you look at a team of 30 teams playing in a vast territory, and indeed into Canada, and then say, but we want to compare this league with, say, Portugal, which is, it's just, you can't compare. They're not like for like, or the Netherlands or something like that, or Sweden. This is a league we should love on its own merits, for its unique aspects, and for the fact that it's still very young. And we want to continue to grow it, and we want to continue to blood new generations of fans who, when they do buy their first soccer shirt, it's the red shirt of the Chicago Fire, alongside perhaps the red shirt of Manchester United as well. It's a tremendous opportunity, the next generation really, for this league to continue to grow. It doesn't have to run before it can walk. It is walking well. And now it's just starting to maybe accelerate a little bit. And that's a good, steady progress for it to be on. I'm sure there's going to be more changes down the track and more evolution as the league grows. But it's a league to be proud of and to cherish. And what I would always say as well, we talked at the beginning of this conversation about the fact that an English fan might go and watch a sixth division game rather than maybe watching a Champions League game on television. I would love to see in North America us instill that support for local teams and support for the domestic leagues, because the nation's soccer will grow if the domestic leagues are strong and continue to get strong. So yes, absolutely support the other leagues. Be Real Madrid fans, be Liverpool fans, be Milan fans. But also it's so important to support local teams as well, because everybody will win if the domestic scene is strong.
Awesome. Well, Tony, thank you very much for joining MIR97 podcast. We will be listening to you on the MLS Season Pass tomorrow for Chicago versus Nashville. But yeah, it's been a pleasure having you on the show here, and all the best.
Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure to be on, and I hope everybody enjoys the game.